first time, actually, that I got to meet Carl and talk to him was actually that party, I think,
Yeah,
Carl.
it was. Well, I think I
And
never met
and so
before.
Jake was here at the old chicken and chicken party, and so we got together on my back porch here.
Get their paper.
Yeah, we got back on together on the back porch, and that was our first get together. I got to meet Carl,
And Vern Williams and Ray Parks was here
and
too.
yeah, they always came to the good old chicken and chicken
And
party.
we were sitting out there about 2 o'clock in the morning drinking a little Kentucky's Finest.
Yeah,
Talking about putting an association together.
that's right. hmm
So this
And,
is where it all started right here.
Yeah, yeah, we had the people lined up all clear down the road on the last one, clear down to the bottom of Overlook Road. And the fire department came up and the police department came up. And that was the last one we had because they're parked alongside the road all the way from here down to the beginning of it, which is 1.25 miles. And you just drove the road, so you know.
Oh yeah, I know.
Do you remember the exact date of that, Jack?
I don't.
How about an approximate?
It was in the fall, I'm sure, and it had to be 1973 or 4, maybe
I think it was
too.
74 was the last one you had.
Yeah,
74?
Yeah.
and
Well, other things that happened, when did that festival take place up there in Marin County that flopped on its nose?
Oh.
It was a big one, run by a rock promoter, a woman,
oh
who
yeah,
lost a ton of money.
About 1975.
Yeah, I
No,
was
that
there.
was not 75.
Probably
That was before I knew Jake, I think. Yeah, the Whites.
Whites, yeah.
The Whites.
The Whites, they were there.
Oh, they had a great talent lineup, but the stage was, yeah, this big barrier around the front of it, like, you know, like everybody was gonna rush the stage. The stage was about 25 feet high, looking down at the performers, the bluegrass performers, they were astonished. Jim and Jesse were there too.
Yeah.
They were perplexed by the stage and the whole layout. And you had to leave everything out. The vehicles were out on the parking lot. You walk through the metal gates, and you had to leave everything behind, you know. And you go in there, and anyway, it was. But Keith Little was there, and I ended up playing all night with him, singing gospel songs. And
That's
his
the
sister
first
was
time you
there.
met him?
He was about 17 years old, I think,
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get the exact date, because I think that was before I knew Jake Quisenberry. But at the same time, I was getting, you know, some knowledge of.
Dick Tyner was there, and he'd already done Norco.
Oh, Dick Tyner was doing Norco in Southern California, and they were great I went down to those, and they were great. Roasted pigs, and he moved all around. Yeah, that was an exemplar, but how
So
not to do it was that one in Marin County. It flopped like a. Pardon?
So you guys felt that there was a need for something else.
Well, absolutely, that was a
Yeah.
way not to do something.
You know, before I knew Carl, Jake Quisenberry and I were good friends. And Jake, boy, he had a drive. He just wanted to. He was even talking about building a building and buying some land just to have a bluegrass association. And so Jake and I, we probably hemmed and hawed about it for a year. And he finally met this guy.
At the radio station.
At the radio station, and played with him, and found out that Carl was interested. Carl's an attorney, a practicing attorney. We don't speak bylaws, you know, in my world.
By law, he's.
But he speaks bylaws and everything, and man, what a fit! When he came in, it all started. It started boiling when Carl came
Well,
in.
a couple things to say about it is my 3 years in the East, which had landed me right in the middle of the heart of the bluegrass festival. I started going to festivals the very first weekend I landed back in the Washington D.C. area. Take It Easy Ranch in Callaway, Maryland, and up to Pennsylvania and the Susquehanna River, and just every which direction, West Virginia, Potomac Highlands Park, American Legion Park in Virginia, Culpeper. There were festivals every single weekend within driving distance. And bluegrass was just thriving, throbbing, you know, it was so
climbing,
live and vibrant. And coming back and being transferred back in 1973 from there California, having been gone for 3 years, it was like, I always say it's like a bluegrass desert. I mean, it wasn't without cactus growing here and there. Pretty good ones, so Chicken Picnic Party was a pretty tall oasis and all that.
We had all the good pickers here.
But there were pickers and there were musicians, but they were not in touch with each
About the
other.
biggest thing we had back then was fiddle contests.
That's
Yeah.
it, to keep people, and the old time fiddlers, they're, the problem I had with them is they're totally interested in old time fiddle.
Yeah.
And they give an accompanist, could be the greatest guitar player in the world, $5 for accompanying the fiddle player.
$5 and a
I was
thank
a
you.
member of the old time fiddlers in 1968, 69, and 70. And when I left California, came back, I helped start District 9 out there, and it started in Concord, which is now over in Castro Valley. So I was active in the old time fiddlers. But the Limited was going full blast, and it was kind of Washington centric because they were based out of Washington D.C. So they covered all the events in the neighborhood back there, but out here, no coverage whatsoever. So there was a need, right? I saw it, the radio program, that was a shining beacon from the very start. There was a fully sponsored radio, 3 hours, 3 hours or 3.5 hours on Saturday afternoon. Started I think at 12:30 and went till 4:30 or 5. I think it was 12:30 to 4:30 anyway.
Where was
Something
the
like
station
that.
at?
It was a long, fully sponsored.
Where was the station?
Well, later it was KNEW. I've forgotten the call letters
Yeah.
of the station. It was one of the main AM stations in San Francisco.
Okay.
And it was coming out full blast. And I heard that on the radio, broadcasting live from the orphanage. I had
Yeah.
a picture, this building with glum bars on the windows, an orphanage. And when I drove over to it on Montgomery Street, it was right across from Mel Belli's office down it was the old Roaring Twenties, the Girl in the Swing. It was a beautiful. It later became KNEW in Oakland, but before that it was one of the major top 3 radio AM programs out of San Francisco. Unusual to turn your radio dial on an AM station and get this booming. I mean, it was great.
Was it Channel 91? Was it KEWB?
You're asking me now, it's not only the call letters, but the station
Yeah.
and the numbers. I don't recall.
What year are you? Remember that?
1973, to be specific. 73, 74, that was the time period of that radio program. Carol Masters was Mick Sieber's assistant. Mick Sieber was the only MC. We had an assistant who became a charter member. Forgotten his name. He later went over to KNEW and was a really nice guy. Really liked bluegrass music. His name's on one of our charter members. But anyway, I met Jake at the radio station, and we quickly became friends. And I invited him to that party over at my place in Lafayette, and he came with his friend Wayne Williams. And I told you about that until 4:30 in the morning, and we talked about an association right from the beginning. I can remember riding in cars, talking with Jake about it, and getting moving. In 1970, things started moving in 1973. I mean, I can see from the documents that by mid-73 I put in their reservation of names with the California correct department, and I started working on the tax. I got the tax exemption from the state of California in October of '74. We finally became a formal organization in December when they stamped the articles and bylaws and the proper governor, and we had our first board meeting in 1975. But Jake was involved in my life from that first meeting in 1973 until he died, and we became fast friends. But I second what has been said about him in terms of his contribution to any meeting he was at. By the time I was really active again in the 80s, Jake, he preferred to play music, like most of us. The organization stuff is, people think I love this stuff because I'm an attorney. I don't. I hate it. I hate all the technical stuff, and it's scut work that has to be done.
Yeah.
And somebody has to volunteer to do it. And it's like any other, it's like
We're just
entering
in
the
it
Porta
for-
Johns or any other damn job that
Like Vern used to say, we're just in it for the money, Jack.
yeah, right. So, you know, things got done because they had to be done.
Yep.
And we had the different talents that, when we needed them, we were lucky. And we've had, you know, you talk about, you ask about misfortunes and backsteps. I only gave you one quick one. There have been other ones. That, the most recent, you wanna talk about it? We had a treasurer that failed to file our tax returns. And it was all over the newsletter. We lost our favorite tax days with the feds. And it took the action of a whole slew of people working their butts off
But it got
to
taken
put
care
the,
of.
put the thing back together and refile and get a retroactive reinstatement of the tax. This is the latest crisis. That you talk about it, losing your tax exempt status for a 501c3, there can be no more serious and disruptive event in the whole universe, you know, for an organization. And we survived that most recently. Before that, we survived a narrow brush with bankruptcy when Supergrass and for the first time Grass Valley lost money in about its 33rd year. Playing music, and I'm telling you, that was just, we gelled that night. And we had you know, he had the fire for an association just like I did.
Oh, yeah.
So we were simpatico right from the beginning, and we started working. You can see I started in 1974 from some of the papers I have. I put in the application for the name, to reserve the name. All that was done before mid '74, and we actually came formally into being by the end of the year, '74. So that's the date of our birth, 39 years ago. I hope we're around to see the 50th, or the 40th.
No problem.
No problem.
No problem.
We're gonna be fairly decrepit at that time.
You know,
Jake-
one of my fondest memories of the start of the association was how Grass Valley Fairgrounds was chosen. Keith Little told me, he said that the association sent them out as a scouting party. It was
Yeah.
Roscoe Keithley, Keith Little, and John Murphy.
John Murphy too,
And they
yeah.
got together at Roscoe's house, and they got in Keith's car, and they went up to Grass Valley because Keith was from that part of the country. And back then, the fairgrounds was closed during the week unless you had it rented. So John, he's an old North Carolina boy, well, he jumped the fence not knowing that there was a Doberman Pinscher watchdog in there. And he was looking around, and he said he spotted that dog about the same time the dog spotted him. Said the dog was about 200 yards away, and said John hit that fence like a '53 Buick Roadmaster. Cleared it in one single leap, just ahead of that dog.
You remember that? You sent him up there, didn't you,
Well,
Steve?
yeah, I had been at that fairgrounds in 2 events up there and thought that would be a really good place to have a festival, but didn't want to make a decision on my own. So at the board meeting, I appointed John and Keith to go up there, and then they stopped and picked up Roscoe along the way to go up there and check the thing out. I was hoping that they'd actually talk to the fair people, but they didn't. So from that though, when they came back and said, yeah, we like that idea of that place, at the same time, Ray Park was lobbying me really, really heavily to go to Placerville.
Oh.
Because that was his hometown.
Yeah.
It was also mine. I mean, I grew up in Placerville, but I said, Grass Valley looks like a little better place
And
for us to have.
still
You
is.
made
Well,
that was a great decision.
Yes.
So, okay, one of the things that I wanted to say is that you were asking about the big bands and when they came into being. I want to say first, we had big bands here in California. We had High Country, we had Good Old Person, we had Done Gone, we had a number of other bands. I didn't label them all. The New Depression String Band that was a host band up there. So we had great bands at the first festivals, and the idea was that if we're going to bring some from other regions for us that were first starting this, was that they would come and just be participating with the California bands, but this would really be a California band festival kind of thing. And I think that was something that was in the minds of all of us as we began starting this thing, was that we were doing this to help support the musicians here in the area. Provide a place for fans to come, but also to provide a place for the bands to play, earn some money, get some exposure so that people would come and listen to them in their own venues where they were playing around the state. So that was a lot of what was in my mind in terms of doing these things. So my thought was, as we brought bands in, I wasn't there when we started paying the big bucks out to bands to bring them. We brought the first band in when I was still there, which was Buck White when he came in. And then I said earlier about Ricky Skaggs coming along, and I had the fun of saying that I got to hire Ricky Skaggs for a whole weekend. What was really kind of interesting about that is that Keith Little was on the board at the time we hired Ricky Skaggs here. Keith Little ended up going and playing for Ricky Skaggs later on for a number
Yeah,
of
he
years.
played in Ricky's band
So,
for 8 years.
for a long time. He played
Yeah.
for him, and
He
now
was with the
Keith's
Country
back.
Gentlemen before that.
Yeah.
And then one quick thing is that Keith just did a festival for me in Coloma to raise some money for the community hall where Keith met Vern and Ray and Lori and all of these other people that played up there in the little community hall in Coloma, the same place I put on the first festival. Not at that hall, I did it at the campground, but that community hall was in disrepair, needed some money, and the way that I had done other things, I said, Keith, will you do this? And he said, sure, and if it's you, I'll do it any way you want. And I said, well, let's make it sharing the door like we always used to do. And so we had the little concert thing to raise some money for the hall. We made over $3,000 for the hall and got to pay each musician $1,000 recently. So that's the way to do it. So I just wanted to talk about saying that early on, in the first ones, we had some big bands. We had a lot of good bands playing here in California. Your band wasn't exactly what I call a shabby band either. And I'm saying that with fun, saying, here's one of the good bands, Overlook Mountain Boys.
You bet.
Well, as time went on, certainly the local bands were important throughout CBA history right from the start. But there were a lot of people that had the attitude that, and bands would tell you this, they aren't gonna turn out for the local bands because they can hear them anytime. That was the old saying. You needed somebody, it was an opportunity to bring in a name that was really prominent. And West Coast Bluegrass, I can tell you, nationally, got no attention whatsoever. I told you about Bluegrass Unlimited, focusing on Eastern bands. They didn't cover California at all at that time. And Vern and Ray were seriously underappreciated by the national. We know that today by national audiences. But what I'm saying is that there was a whole different range of bluegrass that was taking place back with Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs and the rest of them that were the top. Out here we weren't absent. We had the Dillards, in Southern California that grew up.
Kentucky Colonels.
The Kentucky Colonels. So that was Southern California.
Yeah,
we have a rich history of bluegrass in Southern California. Northern California less so. Vern and Ray.
High Country.
High Country has been around for a long time.
Phantoms of the Opry won the band contest at Bean Blossom in 1973. Which was a proud moment for Californians.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is bringing out bands from the East that had the top names in bluegrass, that became gradually, the board saw that there was an advantage in doing that and increasing the gate, the people, the appeal. We never ignored California bands, the board, but they started considering the need for, or the desirability is a better word for it, bands from elsewhere, from the East, and it would permit an exposure of those bands out here
Well, we afforded
to
our,
California
we
bluegrass.
afforded our patrons the opportunity to see a national touring band we wouldn't see anywhere else.
Right? So that combination has stood in good stead ever since. The balancing act between, and there's been a tension constantly between local bands and local acts and their Grass Valley, especially the biggest festival. I mean, sometimes, the bands that would volunteer to play this event for a fundraiser or that event for a camp out, so forth, but they felt they were denied the opportunity to play at Grass Valley. Everybody wants to play Grass Valley, I know that. Every band. That's desire, but you gotta have a balance, and that was always a tough one for the board to wrestle with. And at various times there were
What year did IBMA come into existence, and when did we join IBMA?
IBMA was 1980, came into being about 1986, but I didn't go to my first, it was like other national associations and had formed and failed shortly, so I figured, this one probably is gonna fail too, but I watched it for a couple of years, and finally in 1989, I went to my first IBMA event. We had a booth with Vetco Records, Country Ham and Vetco. Went back in 1990, started the hospitality suite tradition, simply because to avoid running around trying to find out where the jam session was at IBMA and you just missed it. It was in room 99. Now it's over. It's like the guacamole. You couldn't find it. So we started our hospitality suite, and everything revolved through us, and it still does today. We're still a huge component of IBMA. They'll admit that. That was 1986 when they started.
Okay, because I remember we voted to join IBMA, and I believe it was 1990.
That was after my first year going back there. Probably I came back all.
Because I see that the IBMA, as IBMA gets bigger and the hospitality suite and going back as that kind of watershed moment where the emphasis shifts more to East Coast centric from West Coast, as we have more of a presence back east every year.
We were always, the hospitality suite has always been a home for any California band or California musician that's there at the festival. We've sponsored California bands, you know, the CBA's got behind them, and it's
I'm not talking about sponsoring California bands at IBMA. I'm saying at that moment, because now IBMA has become this legitimate event that Californians and board members are attending, that there's a shift in emphasis and focus from California to more East Coast.
I don't think we've ever had a complete shift of focus. I disagree with you. I think we've always been focused. It's always been a balance issue, and it's always been debated, and it's gone back and forth, and it's
Well, we're having
pretty good balance today.
We're having a little board meeting around here by.
Yeah, I can
Well, no,
remember.
I
I can remember, Carl.
State.
You know, I missed a lot of years, but during the time when I wasn't there, there was a major, severe, sort of rebellious movement that went around amongst a lot of the member guys, and I know about this because people that were recording in my studio were telling me all about this, and that would be like Lytle and Lance and those guys. There was a Santa Clara Valley at the time sort of group of people, and that we're going to quit the CBA. They don't believe in California bands. This year's festival there wasn't a single California band, and going on about that, and saying you put the C back in the CBA, and there's even bumper stickers. So there was a definite sort of grassroots sort of rebellion thing, and if there hadn't been something going on, I mean, I don't think it was just two guys making it up, you know, so there must have been some sort of discontent. I joined the CBA with my family, and I believe it was 1995 was our first year. It had been 13 years that I hadn't been able to be here, and you know, that conflict had been dealt with successfully by that time because there were California bands around, you know, and I didn't feel like I was walking into dangerous waters to come into Grass Valley. But I mean, you want to talk about it anymore?
1994.
I don't remember when.
94?
Yeah.
I remember not going up there because there were no California bands, and I felt like we started this, they gave a whole lot in terms of their willingness to come and take a chance, and now we're not even hiring them. I wasn't there for a number of those years.
Well, yeah, on the other hand, though, you got to draw. Do you think that we would have the same, you think it would have grown at the same?
Well,
I
I
challenge
wasn't on the
you.
board, so.
I challenge any one of you to point to a single Grass Valley where we didn't have California bands.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
We had California bands in each and every one of them.
I don't ever
It
remember.
may have not been, it may have fluctuated on number, and eventually we came up with the California submission, you know, where you submitted, that was one way to get it. You either were a nationally touring band, and it could be picked like a Laurie Lewis, or I think Butch Waller was considered in that category, but Laurel Canyon, there were a lot of bands that were considered headliners that you would contract with. Those that weren't quite, that weren't going to have a chance to be a headliner, they may have been a damn good band, they could submit, and it was decided to pick a certain number of California bands that would play as California showcases. That came later, I don't know what they called them, but there was a history to all that.
But you're right, Joe.
We weren't
There
all
was
that.
there was that.
There was a
that.
conflict. I remember that, but they thought there was-
It did happen.
There weren't enough California bands being picked, and especially they weren't picking the bands that the disgruntled members were in. You can't, you could never hire all the California bands. I mean, the Bay Area at any time has probably 30 or 40 or 50 bluegrass bands.
Well, it's the dilemma a private promoter doesn't have to deal with. A nonprofit organization has a charter and bylaws, and this is what we're supposed to be doing. Makes it much more difficult with the selection process. I mean, old time was gradually eased out to where we had to make an effort to bring them back, a conscious effort. But before 1994, there was Pollock Pines, and that was a 2-year event that ran. That was originally started, and JD can probably speak to this better than I can.
What's that about?
The Pollock Pines Festival that got
Competitor
started.
festival.
It was, yeah.
That was
people-
78, 79, and 80.
Yeah, there was some competition. The CBA was never assured that it was going to
There's still
live from
competition
one day to,
today.
yeah, there is.
There'll always be competition.
You're never
That's
assured
good.
you're going to live from one day to the next or 1 year to the next. Yeah, competition today. We've got a festival that's taking place a week after Grass Valley that Gene Bach puts on up there. That's it. We have.
Didn't Huck Finn take place the same weekend this
Pardon?
year? Didn't that Huck Finn festival take place the
Huckford's
same weekend?
but it's 400 miles away. So there's another one in Santa Barbara that same weekend too that came up. So there are 3 different festivals in California, big ones. Ours, yeah, there's competition all around us, but we worked out. We were fairly cooperative with Don Tucker and his festival. He poached our lineup a lot because we were way ahead. We would book way ahead of him.
No, he piggybacked off of
And
our
he would
festival.
piggyback. When I say poached, that's a bad word. Piggyback, it's a better word.
Well, that helps the bands. You can afford to make the
Oh, it does. And
cross
that's why
country trip if
we
you've got.
recognize that. That's why we were supportive of it.
But Don was an honorable promoter.
And I love Don. Yeah, he was. And if a band could play both, and that's what we get them out to California for a reasonable price because they played both. Hey, that was great.
You bet.
Well, speaking of that, I just before we move on from that era of conflict, when you're talking about between, do we have enough California bands here? Do we have enough big national touring bands from the east to
Tension
attract
still
people?
exists.
So it seems to me like that's been dealt with pretty successfully by the organization because I see top line national bands of Grass Valley and I see the top California bands of Grass Valley. So I'm guessing that it has something to do with the structure of an organization that it can go through a
CBA, and we've survived all of them.
What are some of the others?
Well, one of them was where we described in the early '80s where the CBA took on the task of hiring the talent for the Vallejo Festival, sponsored by Budweiser, KNEW, Ralph Terry, and there was a third sponsor in there. Anyway, we went out on the lead, hired all the bands. It wasn't successful, and we paid the bands because our name was behind it, and then we expected to be paid by these big deep pockets, the Budweiser beer distributor up in Fairfield, the KNEW radio station, part of Metro Media, and they didn't pay us. And it was turned over to me, and I spent a year and a half. I knew I was going to get the money because, as I was saying, if we had to file a suit against Multimedia and Metro Media and Budweiser, claiming that they didn't pay us $5,000 or $6,000, to repay bands that we've been hired by them to, it wouldn't have looked good at all. We could have probably got punitive damages or something. But anyway, they paid us eventually, and I knew they would. We got every red stamp. But that was a crisis because we didn't have the money then. $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 is enough to put us, in bankruptcy. And when you started, there were people, you and others maybe, I know Jake was willing to mortgage their houses if they had to pay off the bands and do whatever they had to do.
I
to
came
make that
into it
first.
expecting to having to bail out.
Yeah, you and Jake, and
Yeah.
I know that you were ready to financially pony up. I had just come back. I wasn't involved with arranging the first festival or picking Grass Valley. But if I'd have been here, I'd have felt the same way. You had the passion to do it.
But the good part is we made money, we haven't looked back.
Yeah, that's the good part.
We had the finest clogging groups.
The Foggy Mountain Quaggers.
They were a show clogging group. They weren't one of these.
They were the best.
Individual where they were very traditional. They were choreographed with great costumes. They were the best, and we had them available for about I don't know, 15 years.
Absolutely.
They played for a long time for us, and they were spectacular, an adjunct to the key part of the festival. They brought, a visual liveliness that wasn't there otherwise. They were part of the tradition of the Appalachian music. It was great.
And then they quit.
After 30, yeah, they quit. Then we had to go out and we got a bunch of different clogging groups. Utah, we brought them in from Utah. Had California. We had to assign somebody to find these groups. They're playing them around.
It just wasn't the same.
There's a very active Bay Area contra dance group that literally the Bluegrass Association has no interchange with at all, interface at all whatsoever. They have camps and they're all around. They're dancing all the time. Bands play contra dance and get paid for it. There ought to be a real interchange between today. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But in the past, that's true. Anyway, after 30 years of having the cloggers, we were in the 30+ years. One year, the board decided it was too much trouble. Couldn't find any cloggers. They didn't have anybody that was volunteering to go out and be the contact point, do the work. So they said we won't have them this year. Well, they've never revisited the thing, and we've never had them since. It's just that was like the coup that cut off the cloggers' heads. I happen to think that clogging is, I don't dance myself. I love to play for cloggers, and I love seeing cloggers. If I could dance anything, I would want to be
You can't dance?
dancer. I can't dance.
Good.
Steve,
But I love to play for. I love dancers. I really do. I think they had a whole different dimension to the festival, and I regret the loss of the dancers. And I guess I should bring it up again at the current board a few times and have them ignore it. But
has there been a successful continuation of keeping old time music represented at the festivals? Has that worked out smoothly? People had to fight for that, or has there been conflicts about that?
We've always had old time music.
Yeah, because the charter, the bylaws say that to preserve, promote, etc., bluegrass, old time,
And
gospel, old time, and traditional acoustic music of the United States. That's the language.
Yeah.
So we could technically, I always say this, we've never had a Cajun band on stage. We've had bands that have played some Cajun music, but we could actually host a Cajun band. They're traditional, and they would be within our bylaws. We never have. But the existence of the word old time and gospel have been enough to make sure that we have representation from both of those genres of their old time is a before 1946 there was no distinction between old time and bluegrass really. It was they were one and the same, and the split came with Earl Scruggs and the bluegrass band with Bill Monroe, and there was a split, but they're part of our history. Old string bands, really the Monroe brothers, they were a string band in the 30s, so that goes way back. The gospel music goes back 200 years in our history. The fiddle tunes go back 200
Jack
years.
had
All
a chicken
part
and
of it.
chicken party, and look what happened.
Yeah, right. So that's all part of it, and yes, we've had to fight more recently to make sure that old time was represented, and we've done a conscious effort, and we've really had an outreach to the old time community, and if they aren't reacting, it's their fault.
Well, I think Steve Goldfield is
He's done a great job.
He's putting ads, or not ads, but little articles in the breakdown, and he's running a.
Well, we have actually a columnist, Jeff Crawford, I think, who does an old time thing in the breakdown. We have Steve Goldfield on the board doing a great job running the Golden Old Time Camp out and making sure old time is heard. And
Actually-
Mark has been an old friend of old time from long ago.
Well, you and
Yeah, me too.
and Gene Bach and I and the late Darrell Johnson made
Started
a
it.
private sector venture into it to sort of kickstart old time, integrating it into the bluegrass thing.
Yeah, we had a festival for 2 years up at Wairika called the Golden Old Time Festival, and after 2 years we threw in the towel, but the Golden Old Time has reappeared as part of the
Picked it up.
CBA
The Boonville Camp out now.
Boonville Camp out.
What about black gospel music? Has there ever been any outreach to bring that into the festival?
There's never been an attempt to do that. I mean, I think the Fairfield Four, if we could get them with the Nashville Bluegrass Band, that would have been great. I mean, they did shows together. The an outfit like the Fairfield Four,
I
but
don't know if we could afford that.
I don't know if we could afford them, and I don't know, you know, we've had, you could probably count on your, well, more than two hands, I'm sure, but the number of black,
Performers.
well, performers, we haven't, performers, we had, I think the first one was Earl White this year.
Yeah.
We haven't had many of them. But now we have, you know, we have a couple of groups that are performing, Carolina Chocolate Drops, the Hillbillies from New York City, that's all my black, they're all black, Ebony Hillbillies. And there've been others, a family out of Texas, that the family band down there. So there've been some black performers, but what's rare are a black audience for, you know, they just, I noticed there were probably more black people at Grass Valley this year than ever before. I noticed, you know, but that isn't very many. You can count them on between your two hands. I'm sure you can cover them all. I don't know why that is. I think it's perceived as a white music, and even though the banjo is entirely, we owe that to black history. I think the association of the banjo with slavery and bad times is just enough to, they've tossed it away, and eventually, I think, when enough of that history recedes into the background, I think they'll return, because there are black banjo players that love the instrument. Even, you know, even performers like Taj Mahal plays the banjo. So whether we need to do more in trying to get a black gospel group, I don't know. Maybe we do.
Can we talk about Jake Quisenberry a bit, since he's not here? I'm thinking that each guy, we could maybe take turns, and each one of you guys has got to have something to say about Jay.
If he couldn't make you laugh, nobody could make you laugh, I'll tell you that. He can make a wooden Indian laugh, isn't that right, Carl?
Oh, yeah. I think he was the best MC that I ever saw perform.
Absolutely. Natural.
Well, I think more of Jake as one of the kindest fellows. He wouldn't hurt anybody. I've never heard him say anything bad about anybody, as a matter of fact. Usually it's all good. He had a burning desire to start a festival, and he finally accomplished that and got to see that through. He loved music. He loved bluegrass, but he also loved, like folk music kind of thing, like the rest of us.
He was a great songwriter.
And he's
my God.
Excellent songwriter.
And and one thing I'll never forget, he did it several times. We were on stage, and when he'll look over and say, "Carl, when you die, can I be number one?" And then I'll say, "Well, Jake, when you die, then can I be number one?"
Carl, in fact, is membership number one in the CBA, and Jake was number two, and you're number three.
Number three, yeah.
Yeah.
So he loved to say that.
Yeah, he did.
I sort of heard him say that more
I
than
can
once.
tell you a story that I went on a fishing trip, and I had an accident. My head broke open with blood, and he had to take me to the hospital, and it was a really rough afternoon for him. He was the guy with the heart. I was looking after him, and I'm the one that got injured. And he said he always told the story on stage about that fishing trip up to the. He said, "I wondered if Carl died and didn't make it, would I become number one?" He had a great sense. He had a great.
Yeah.
Jake was. Became one of my very closest friends that I've ever had on earth, and he was everything. I mean, he had integrity. I don't care what job he did. You know, he came out here when he was 19 years old or so. He tried to get enlist in the service when he was underage. They threw him out. And we had to wait till he was 18 to go back and sign up again.
Yeah, that was
but then they assigned him as a chauffeur, as a general up in San Francisco, and he was pounding around San Francisco. And we talked about the first time he came out when he would have crossed the Benicia Ferry. And I was working on the ferry boat in 1951, so that's the year he came out to California, and he met Janet in San Francisco, Italian, so different from him, and his funny stories
Worlds
about the
apart.
family and meeting her father, and who may have been associated with the mafia. But anyway, really funny stories. And
Very talkative.
he wrote that song, Dago Red and what is it?
They were red and cornbread.
Cornbread, Dago Red,
Dago Red.
Dago Red. The family's all mixed up anyway about the mixture of a country boy marrying an Italian girl, and they both became. Jan was a good friend too. Anyway, Jay had everything a good human being should have: integrity. When Janet passed away first, Jake missed her so much, and I said. I said at one point to him, I said, I don't know how you've carried on and survived so well. He said, I talk to her every night. I said, what? He said, yeah, before I go to bed, I talk to her every single night.
Yeah.
And he was that sort of a person, married 55 or whatever number of years, completely loyal. I mean, I think he got a kick out of Jan being jealous, because all these women would hit on Jake when he played music out on the stage, and Janet would get furious, that Italian temper, and Jake would just kind of smile at it all and laugh it off. He never gave her any reason to be jealous. He was always faithful as could be. But Jake, what a human being. I mean, you would hold him up. When he sang gospel music, he meant it.
You bet.
He came from hard times in Kentucky and from a family that I can't say enough about Jake. He was such a dear friend and such an influence, and it was like,
Eventually.
it was wonderful to meet Jake and to have him part of my life. I am so grateful that I had the wonderful good fortune of meeting a person like Jake.
Me too.
Amen.
How about you?
Yeah, back around to me now. You asked me first. You
I
remember that?
thought you asked JD. Chipped in.
What I remember is that a person with a real sense of music, and we had other musicians on the board. Jack Sadler was on the board, for example. But what Jay always reminded us of when we were making decisions about things, he had a real calming influence about things. And I remember in conducting these board meetings and trying to figure out our direction, how we're going, how he provided some really good statements about, here's how we should go about doing this. This is the music is what we're going after, and having the music be there as a primary motivating thing for what we were doing and how we made these business decisions. He was extremely helpful with regard to that on the board.
He had a factor about him that's not very common, and that's common sense.
Well, he did have that, and but in terms of making us aware of what we should be deciding, always bringing up that, you can talk about make an event happen, make it be successful, but Jay would say, but the music's got to be good. Got to have good music. Got to set it up. So you do that, and he brought that, and he played. It was fun. He asked me to come over to the house and play with him a couple times, and I enjoyed those times together doing things. This guy had a rich heritage of what he was doing with music, things that he brought to us, and with the common sense that you're talking about on the board when he would talk about these things. So my recollection is that here I am conducting a board meeting, and I want people to be supportive and helpful of things, and he helped bring more people into doing that and help make really good decisions. So that's the part that I would lift up. The personal things that you've mentioned, I have some of those relationships with him as well, but for the CBA and what he did for the CBA in terms of bringing that sense of things, of calmness, here's what we need to do and here's why we're doing it. He was there, enthusiastic, and you're right, nothing ever negative, was it? Never.
He was at a lot of venues,
Supporting people, yeah.
yeah, talking about the CBA. He got around to a lot of places that wouldn't have even, sort of like an advertising business. He really did it
I
well.
love Jake because the glass was always never half empty,
That's
always
it.
half full.
Very good, yeah. Yeah.
And
So, yeah, I wonder, because in that organization, in the first, the formation, you got Carl Pagter, who was a banjo player and a singer. You got Jack Sadler, who was a banjo player and a singer. And you got Jay Quisenberry, who's from Kentucky, plays guitar and sings, and sang bluegrass. And so, do you think that was an important element in the early
Absolutely,
founders, that they were
absolutely.
actually players and
It takes a musician to understand the music.
Yeah.
and then, there's a million musicians that play bluegrass or more, but not many of them that can form an organization.
Well, all the rest on the board were playing music too. When I came on the board, I was playing. Keith Little was on the board. He was playing. John Murphy was on the board. He had his own band. So yeah, you had everybody there really into the music, as well as providing the organizational part of it. And then there were various ones that had more skill with doing things. We're talking first here that he may be the senior one of us. I think you're probably the senior one on the board.
Really?
On the board at the time, right? Were you the
Oh,
lowest?
sure, I'm usually, no, wait a minute.
Jay was
How old was Jay?
about the same maybe.
Okay.
Jake was about your age.
Yeah.
Yeah, close to the same. I do recall thinking at one time, as had to make decisions between board meetings, because that first festival thing brought a whole lot of stuff that we had to do.
Yeah.
Did you ever get the feeling that you didn't want to hear from me anymore? Because I called you a bunch of times.
No,
You were the one that really provided a way for me to have a sounding board, so that this wasn't something I was doing for me, it was for the CBA, and I called you a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, well.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, but I don't remember, what was the word?
Didn't listen to us.
No, I'm happy to talk to you anytime. Well, I kinda hate to tell this, it kinda makes me look silly, but,
Oh, go ahead.
Jake just had to throw an event of his own once in a while, so he'd have that, what is it, the Brown Barn?
Yeah.
Incident or whatever. And so I was playing cowboy music, Sons of Tom Pioneers kind of music, and we went over pretty good, In fact, there was somebody I know said, "Hey boy, you guys were the best band there," and I told Jake that. Guy told me that. He says, "Well, you were the best cowboy band there." You were the only one. Yeah, that's Jake.
Was there any apprehension on the fairgrounds part that this would turn out to be some kind of rock festival, and were they worried at all that, did you have to reassure them in any way that this was not gonna be something crazy, it was different?
I don't think that was a great concern to them. I think the biggest concern to them was, could we put on something rather and even make it successful? There was a concern on our part, and we did express that to them, so probably all of us together were concerned that anything that we're doing would end up being really a bluegrass thing. Acoustic was the big key thing that all of us wanted to see take place with it. I think they were, when I first approached them, they asked a lot of questions about, can you really do this and can you make it happen? And I think we probably would not have had Grass Valley as a spot to do this if it hadn't been for Bill Anderson, because he was a teacher there in the community, and because he was interested in it and was working with me to do this and set up all of these kinds of arrangements. They had enough confidence in us to do it. So yeah, I think that was an issue. It was talked about, but by all of us on the board, probably as much as the fairgrounds, and they brought it up, and we said we were already talking about it. So that was an issue, and it was an issue as to how do you establish it kind of limits. Part of a little bit of what I talked about in recruiting the bands when I recruited South Loomis Quickstep. They could have led us in the direction of going away from bluegrass and maybe even bringing in electric things. They would be a band that would be willing to try most anything kind of, and so that was there. That was a concern on the part of everyone.
There were a lot of ordinances passed after that Altamont incident in various towns that would preempted having large events, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, they didn't, I don't think they had any music events there. From my recollection of talking with the fair people, I don't think they'd ever done anything like that, so they hadn't thought about a whole lot of things with regard to that. It's a pretty
Well,
low-key
back then,
place.
Steve, you know, if you wanted to rent, the fairgrounds was closed during the week unless somebody had the money to rent it, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause our first festival, we didn't open the gate until Friday afternoon, about 4:30.
Yeah, that's-
And it's not like it is today where they rent, you know, spaces out, campers,
Oh, no.
people passing through.
It was a whole different ballgame
Oh,
in the
boy,
beginning.
tell me about it.
Yeah.
And the fun thing was is that it really was a different ballgame in the sense that nobody came with preconceived notions about what should happen. And to a great extent, I think everybody that became involved in this got enthused about it. In fact, I could tell you stories about people telling me, and then I get secondhand stories about things that took place at the first festival that never happened. And people saying that they did this when it was actually the board that had gotten together and already had done it. And I never corrected most of those because for the most part, I felt like it was their way, all those people that were saying these things, of buying into this thing because people were excited and it became theirs. And I think those of us on the board did some things to help that, promote that. So now if you go and really start looking at history and getting facts from, you saw little differences just between us here now. You start going getting a few other people that weren't there at the part on the board making decisions, you're gonna get even different stories. And it's great. I mean, that's what oral history is about. Because these people got excited and were part of it. And
Let me give you a good example. We had Rose Maddox playing at our festival back in the early 80s. And I was talking to her backstage, and just out of the corner of my eye, I seen a couple of people had their ear to our conversation. And Rose was close friends with Merle Haggard. I said, Rose, I said, is it true that Merle might come down and watch you on stage? She said, yes, as a matter of fact, he mentioned if he gets time, he'll come down. I says, he's gonna show up in his old green 56 Ford pickup with a white camper on it, right, so nobody will know, because I seen a truck like that driving in the parking lot. She says, yeah, I said, he's got an old truck like that. So these people took off, and it wasn't an hour that there was a rumor spread through there that Merle Haggard was there, and about 50 people had already seen him.
Yeah.
You know,
See,
I
that's
did.
the kind of stuff Jake and I couldn't handle. That's why you do yours.
And we had a lot of debate, a lot of healthy arguments over, you know, what is bluegrass, what form should it take, what should the festival take, how much old time, how much bluegrass, what kind of balance between local and national acts, all those things. And eventually the policies that, we started in the first year, if you remember, dogs were permitted. There were no problem with dogs, you know, but we found out that people weren't keeping control of their dogs, so I think we went then to dogs on leash.
The kid
You have to
with the
control your
skateboard.
dogs. That was probably after the first or second year when dogs were running around. They still let them run around. So the board then adopted a policy, no dogs at Grass Valley. That lasted until a couple years ago when we had board members that looked at it, came up with a very, very circumscribed, heavily detailed dog policy, and so far it's worked, I guess. I still think it's too crowded a festival for dogs, and
Absolutely.
it was against my opposition right to the last, from a liability standpoint, that the board, but it's worked. So is the bicycle policy revision, from no bikes to bikes. If, you know, I don't want to see some one of our members being run down by a bike, which almost happened at one time.
It did happen.
And we were lucky to escape a lawsuit, but you know, these things get kind of lost with new boards. New board members don't have that history, and so now we allow bicycles, we allow motorcycles, all circumscribed, and it's healthy to have, you know, not to have things so locked in granite they never change. And we've changed a lot over the years, and we have board members that are conscientious. They all know, you don't have to preach to them about their duties under California law. They have duties as board members to discharge their duties as best to their ability, the best as they're able, always make honest decisions. I think for the most part, that's worked very well. We had a conflict of interest situation with somebody in the past.
That
Got
person
thrown
left.
out, yeah, that person left and hasn't
Okay.
surfaced since. We've had people that, oh my God, anyway, a lot of dirty laundry.
the first years were fun, we didn't have much of that.
I was gonna
Well,
say, that's what
yeah.
I was gonna say, it was exciting to us, new and exciting, God, we're doing something.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, but after an association gets so old, these things
yeah,
start to surface.
well, yeah,
Well,
I
sure,
could see
it's
how
gonna
they
happen.
would, but it was really a joyful ride when I was in there.
I can remember.
And then you have bumps.
Yeah,
Jack.
Well, I understand how
What year was the first festival?
1976.
76. Okay.
The early things too that I'd like to bring up is I looked at the picture of Ray Park over there. I was the one that came up with the idea of lifetime memberships. And I came up with that idea because I thought we should elevate those that really had done something significant in the bluegrass music. And I also suggested when I brought that idea to the board that Ray Park and Vern be the first ones to do that, to be given that
And they were.
thing. And so they were the first recipients of the lifetime membership.
Do you realize all four of us are lifetime members?
No,
So is Mark.
the four of you are.
Aren't you?
No.
I thought you were.
No. I remember that you came up with your little sports car and picked me up in Denisha, and we went to Fairfield because we had been told about the possibility of a place there where we could play. Do you remember going
Yes,
to Fairfield?
I do.
Do you remember, and this is one of the things I said earlier, that I turned to Jack a lot for questions and working on things initially to really have some response from someone else. And then when we come to do this, presenting these, Jack, you came to me and you said, could I please give the plaque to Vern? Would you be happy with just giving the one to Ray? And it's that type of thing that Jack did and a whole lot of other people did. They didn't come to me saying, I gotta do this, this is mine, or any of that type of thing. So do you remember on stage?
I really don't.
You don't
No,
remember
I
on
do
stage?
not remember.
You handed Vern his plaque, I got to hand Ray
Oh,
his
yeah.
on stage.
No, I
At-
totally forgot that.
At the concert that we had in Fairfield there.
I'll be darned. I
So-
see the picture I recently,
So, Stephen, just while you're on the topic of Vern and Ray, what happened? Does anybody know?
Do what?
Between Vern and Ray?
Yeah, I
Does
know.
anybody know
I
what
know.
happened?
You wanna know? They recorded an album for Homestead Records. They did it without a signed contract. And Vern told Ray, we're not gonna release that until we get a signed contract with him. And Ray went ahead and told the guy to go ahead and release it, and they did, and that's what broke them up. They
But
never-
the
they never made
situation is
it-
that
They never made a dime off of that record.
the two of them loved their music together. Neither one of them could handle business things, including the business relationship between each other.
Amen.
They were both great, great guys. I can remember going to the Freight and Salvage, listening to the two of them play down there. At the break, we went out, sat in their pickup, and they passed the bottle back and forth, and I'd have a sip out of it, and I'd take a tiny sip because I couldn't handle what they were doing. They loved each other. They liked playing music together, but they just did not have
Didn't
the
have the-
ability to handle
No.
the business kinds of things, and
Not at all.
that's really.
and
what caused the problem.
for some reason, they wouldn't get
Wouldn't get a
an
manager.
agent or a manager, and they just went.
Neither one of them would have
They
listened
would
to
have
some.
not have listened.
No.
Yeah, you know.
I read a letter from County Records to Ray. He showed it to me, and it
No,
said,
it's from Rounder Records.
what did I say, County?
County.
Oh, no, I'm sure you're louder.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting me.
Ray,
And it
anytime.
offered to record them, handle all of the business part of it, send them around Canada and the United States on a tour, and it wouldn't cost them a thing. Well, so they got to talking. Ray told me this, and he said, now Vern would tell you something else, I'm sure. But Ray said Vern was going to want to take his son for the guitar player. Well, Ray said, I got a son too who plays guitar. And they got to arguing about that and just let it go waste, went up in the air. They had a chance to get national. And that's why they didn't get national.
Ken Irwin and I tried to arrange that tour for 10 years, never happened.
Hmm.
They just wouldn't listen, they just wouldn't listen.
Then Delbert switched to a different instrument. Both boys played guitar. really
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, both of Ray's boys ended up as professional guitar
yeah.
players, yeah.
Boy,
What was the name of they played
Boy,
together?
Boy, howdy.
Boy,
Boy, howdy, yeah.
Oh, they buried her on the side of the mountain with my darling sleeping in the ground. I stayed right there till they covered the road, till the last old shovels lay down, till the last old shovels lay down, till the last old shovels lay down. I stayed right there and I cried till the last old shovels lay down.
We talked about Supergrass, that how those, and there were 2 years, wasn't it, 06 and 07, the Supergrass Festival?
That's about right.
Yeah, and so, you know, why was it a failure? What
Because
doomed
they had no
it?
Super Bowl weekend.
Well, I was deeply involved with it. And that was, the choice of the weekend was ultimately proved, you know, we thought musicians don't care that much about Super Bowl. We took a poll kind of around the room, and no one thought Super Bowl was any great event if they could be picking and jamming or something. So we thought we would be able to survive plentifully despite Super Bowl. That'd be a good weekend to do it. And we went for a extensive lineup because we wanted to kick it off with a bang. The indications and intimations that they were going to be substantial supporters of the thing and didn't come through. That did as much to us as anything. And then we misjudged and decided that if we booked the Isaacs on so they were a big draw. They'd come down and fill churches down there. We have the Isaacs as probably our chief act and the second Supergrass, and we expected them to really pull in the local crowd on Sunday, and they didn't. So we had a confluence of different events. The CBA failing to make money at Grass Valley and needing money itself. The cost of the lineup to successfully, anytime you put on a new event, you've got to invest money in it. You know that you're gonna go in the hole for. We were lucky with Grass Valley making money the first year.
It wasn't lucky.
So that was so unusual in event history for you. But starting small and growing is a better option than starting big and flopping. And in a way, that's what Supergrass did. We started big with expectations and promises and indications that never came forward, and everything just collapsed. And it would threaten the organization. We couldn't afford another Super Bowl. We lost so much money that literally there were some of us that had to commit funds and commit to pay. There were those that wanted us to run to Warren Hellman and ask for money. I thought that
It
was
was a real
absolutely
come
not.
to Jesus moment with the membership. We really had to ask them.
We asked for, and our
Pony up,
membership
yeah.
got behind us, and our board members and everything ponied up, and we survived healthily. That's another crisis that we came out of with. It was a tough one, and I'm glad it made us. I think it's made us better for it.
Well, I get the feeling that the organization, the structure somehow, I mean, certainly the people primarily, but secondly, the fact that there's a structure that allows for spreads things around, allows for things most of the times we thought through,
Volunteers are so important,
input
and
from these
they're hard to get.
different sources.
Every time we lose a volunteer that does a really vital job, we get somebody that steps in that has a little bit better job skills.
We were just so lucky to have people step forward. Now, someone who's a charter member that just stepped forward. He's retired newspaperman. He stepped forward to take over publicity, a badly needed, and that's George Martin. George Martin's been with us from the very beginning, but he hasn't really done anything. You know, he's been supportive of the CBA, a member.
Well, he's on the
He's a
board for a
past
number
board
of
member.
years.
But was he on the board for a
Yeah,
number of years?
he was.
Anyway, he's come back anyway, and he's gonna be active. Yeah, that's great. George is a great organized person. Another guy that yesterday that Rick Cornish was really happy about was playing bass up at his pickin' party. Just relocated from somewhere out of state, and he's a musician and he's anxious to volunteer. He wants a job. He's really well organized. And Rick says, "Boy, are we gonna?" He was all excited and glowing about it. So people like that step forward, and you have leadership like Monty Elston and Tim Eads and the people that step up to fill David Brace, that becomes festival director out of the blue, and does a great job. And just wonderful. So it takes a horde of volunteers, in fact, hundreds of them, and we couldn't be here without our volunteers.
God moves in mysterious ways.
And if you start paying people for what some volunteer for, that's the road, in my view, that's the road right to perdition. Because we cannot possibly pay the festival director enough to, we can't, anyway.
Yeah.
We pay certain people, and it absolutely makes sense to pay the newspaper editor, because that's a full-time job it long ago developed into that.
That's amazing.
Let's,
Yeah, the thing that I would go back to in terms of looking back is that as we began things, we had a lot of people being willing to do things and do things in a way that was just what I call really wholesome, just open, excited, interested in doing it, and the musicians around. My favorite memory of all of that is that as I began talking with the musicians and I went around to each of the bands, as I was telling you, it was a job to recruit people. It wasn't like everybody wanted to play there at that time, where it's gotten to now. They became excited as individual bands would participate in things, and as I said, with two of the key bands doing it, then other bands became involved, and we're saying that, yeah, we can go ahead and take a chance because we see that it's going to work. We think that that'll happen. And so I think being around those musicians, seeing some excitement for this to take place, seeing that we were going to have something that was going to work. We didn't know where it would go in terms of whether our goal actually was the amount that we made to pay the bands, and they were going to be happy, I think, with it being less than that if that turned out to be the case, because everybody had an excitement and a real positive attitude towards making this happen. And that, you know, you heard some of the conflicts that occur later, and these are always going to happen when an organization gets going. Those of us at the beginning were really lucky in that we didn't
have those problems.
We didn't, because it hadn't gotten to the place where that could naturally happen, and the group of people that we had there really were excited about doing. So I'd say that excitement with all of the people, and especially for me, what I got a lot out of was I got to go talk to all these musicians and just see their excitement grow. And I did a lot of recruiting of people to come to it at the same time as I went to where various people were playing. I give a pitch on the microphone, they let me get up and talk a little bit about what was going to take place. So some good feelings there back there. I got a mandola from that, from Stan. You know, that's a cool instrument.
Well, as Steve said everything that I was going to say. In the beginning, we didn't have problems like Carl was talking about. Everything was brand new. It was really happening for us. Our dreams were coming true. And there was, well, Steve might have got some negative, but mine, it was a joy, without a doubt. And I got to meet people, get acquainted with people, which I love to do, and meet kids like him. You know, Mark, I can't express anything else that Steve said. It was just a joy doing it. I can't think of a thing that I would have done differently, except I wish I could have stayed in it a little longer, but I couldn't. I had to bail, and had other things that I had to devote my time to. But I got to meet all these guys. We all were young fellas, and in those days, and we just had a lot of fun. And thank goodness Carl stayed in there, and you know, and kind of kept a wick in our little candle going up. So
He was the glue that held things together.
I would also say, Jack, that I think those of us in leadership positions really helped to promote that situation for there not to be too much conflict. You're one of them. Jay was one of them.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I was mentioning earlier with regard to that. We had those kind of people there that if a little thing could come up and become a problem, we had people that knew how to do things in a way to not let that become a problem. That's a big deal.
that's true.
Well, at the very beginning with Jake, the thing I perceived that was really needed out of an organization, and we needed an organization, was the communication between fans, musicians. So musicians would get together with other musicians, they know where things are happening, events, and the same with the fans and supporters of the music. It was never solely for musicians, but it was intended to be a broad organization of those that love the music or attracted to the music. Of course, most people that are attracted in bluegrass play music. They don't at the beginning, they do, now, you know, once they get into it, they find out they can play an instrument. It's never too late. But that organ of communication, this breakdown that we've had since the very beginning with the professional leadership and editorship of Bernie Garlick, that Jack called from the sound post, the Old Time Fiddlers. That was before we thought of a festival, which was all probably in the back of all our minds, and certainly me coming from the festival world of the East, that was a vision I had, is I would love to have a festival, but I had nothing to do with creating the festival, because I was transferred back to Washington DC at a critical moment and had to leave things in capable hands, and it was a year, 15 months before I came back, toward the end of 1976, so I missed the festival. But this organ of communication is still critical, even if you get it online and don't have to read the hard print edition. And that, I would say, plus the fact, you nailed it, the good feeling, volunteers, all of us were volunteers. Yeah. None of us got paid for anything. I pride myself that in 40 years or 39 years with the CBA, I've never charged one single dime, except when I'm paid for musical services, but I never charge a dime for anything. Stamps, legal services, whatever. And there have been those who have become CBA volunteers that we're so lucky.
Yeah.
Amen. I guess my favorite memories is the times I got to play on stage with Vern Williams and Rose Maddox. Plus, I was one of the directors for 20 years, which I resigned, I retired in 2011 due to my health problems, which thankfully has improved over the years. But I got to serve as a director for 20 years, which I'm very proud of. Also served as a master of ceremonies for the Saturday night show for like 20-25 years, which was a lot of fun. But I think my most
You wrote a great column for all those years.
I wrote the JD's Kitchen Bluegrass Cooking column for 28 years for the Breakdown too. Thanks,
Started with that ironware and skillet and Western cooking, and yeah, that was great right from the beginning. People loved your column.
Yeah, that was a labor of love. But I got to introduce Rose Maddox to Joe Val when Joe played our festival. I was standing backstage talking to Joe, and Rose was over there talking to some friends. And he said, "Is that Rose Maddox?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know her?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you introduce me to her?" I said, "Sure." So she got through talking to her friends. She came over there, and I gave her a hug. I said, "Rose, I've got a gentleman here who wants to meet you." I said, "This is Joe Val." I said, "This is Rose Maddox." She says, "Joe, I've been wanting to meet you for years." She took his hand and she gave him a big hug.
Will you marry me?
He was about that high off the ground. He never left a footprint all weekend. So finally they got through talking, and he had to leave because he's getting ready to go on stage. I looked at Rose, I said, "Rose, you don't have a clue who Joe Val is." She said, "No, but I made his day." That was Rose. You never knew what you were going to get from Rose. She was a sweetheart.
I've got a good story about Rose too.
She shocked me to death one time. The last time she played our festival, she had her life story, her book of life story there for sale, plus her CDs and stuff. And she asked me to be her bank, take care of her money, so I did. So Sunday afternoon I went over there and she said, "How we doing?" I said, "I got $12,000 here inside my shirt in a big manila envelope." And I said, "When do you want it?" She said, "Well, wait about an hour," because she had fans there. So we sitting there talking, and the fans finally left, so she's just sitting there looking at me. So I looked at her and I thought, "What?" She says, "How come you never married me?" And I said, "What?" She said, "Well, you know I've been in love with you ever since I met you." I said, "But Rose, I was married when we first met." She said, "I know, but you got unmarried, you married that other hussy." And I said, "Well, Rose," I said, "I'm never getting married again, but I said, if I do, I'll marry you." She said, "That's good enough for Rose." So So that's one of my favorite Rose stories.
I have one too.
Go ahead and tell it.
I don't know if you want to hear a Rose story?
Oh, yeah,
We all have
absolutely.
road stories.
Yeah, we all.
Jack's got a good one too.
Well, arranging her bookings occasionally there in the late years, and finally the board decided they wanted to give her a life membership. And it was pretty delicate because we didn't want to think that we were just giving her this thing so she'd come and play for us. We get it for nothing. It's a cheap way to get Rose to come and play. So anyway, I called Rose up in Oregon and I told her, look, Rose, we want to present this life membership to you. If you come down to the festival, and we talked about arranging the financing and all that. And I said, I have to ask you this, Rose. We don't want in any way to think that we're trying to use you, get you to play for us, but I have to know if you're going to want to play. I said, let me know so I can have some good musicians for you. Oh no, Carl, I don't think I can play.
She wouldn't
So
have that good
over the
help
next,
this year.
she would. This was the last year, and we would talk, make arrangements. Every time I talked to her, about every month or a month and a half up to the festival, because we started a year ahead of time. I'd always end the conversation by saying, Rose, I just want you haven't changed your mind, have you? You're not going to want to play, are you? Because if you do, I want to get some musicians for you. No, don't believe I can play, Carl. Not well enough. She kept that right up to the very last phone call, and I met her at the festival because she was weak, and they wanted me to give her an arm and make sure I escorted her around. So I did that, and I'd gotten to know her well enough that I could be the butt of her jokes without feeling embarrassed, But I asked her again, as soon as I picked her up, you're not going to want to play, are you, Rose? No, don't believe I can. I don't feel up to it. Blah blah blah. We went around to the backstage, and when it was time for her to receive the award, the band that was on prior was still playing, and there was a little warm-up shed or trailer over there, and inside was Jim Eanes and Chubby Wise was playing, and they had that band from the Midwest.
Stony Lonesome.
Stony Lonesome was backing them up, and they were sounding like $1 million. So when Rose went right up the ramp, she wanted to go right to it. Went in there and listened to them. She listened to them, and meanwhile the band up on the stage was finishing up, and she liked the music she was hearing. They kept playing. The band was on its encore finish line. It was about 30 seconds to go, and I said, Rose, it's time. We're gonna need to get around the stage and get you up there for your award. And she was still listening to music, tapping her foot. She says, okay. She says, Carl, believe I'd like to play. 30 seconds before. And I said, okay, Rose. I didn't say, oh my God. I said, okay. And I went down and I said, Rose wants to play. And I swear, we had musicians there inside the 30 seconds.
They were fighting to play with her.
They came up, and we had a band for her. They got up and backed her up, and she played. She wouldn't stop, and of course the crowd was going ape wild. They loved Rose, and she got the award. Anyway, she got me. I think she wanted to play the whole time. What are you going to do just roll the punch? Anyway, that was Rose.
Jack, you got a Rose story?
Oh yeah, you got one.
Yeah, I got several. I don't know her. I didn't know her personally, but I used to go to their. They used to play at the Uptown Ballroom in downtown Modesto.
Yep.
And they used to play on KTRB radio, and so Rose was in her teenage in those days, and she was just cuter than can be with her white cowboy boots and everything.
And her mother was with her, although
Anyway, so I used to go to their appearances there, the dances there, and then they kind of followed them along for a long time. And so as time goes by, I'm up at Grass Valley, and she's there too, and we're sitting in our campground with our RVs, stuff. And she comes and says, "Anybody got a toilet?" She'd talk. "Anybody got a toilet I could use?" And I said, "Yeah, we got one right here." And so she went in there and pottied, and came back down, and she started saying she was going down to pick up some records, and I said, "Well, I'll go help you." She wanted me to go help her carry them back, and so we walked quite a distance. They all had Cadillacs. I don't care. We were at the harmonica player.
Bill?
Yeah, what's his name?
Bill White?
Bill White. we had a, I'm drifting along here, we had a benefit for Rose Maddox up in San Francisco, and guess who put it on was the harmonica player?
Bill White.
Bill White. And here she had her nice shiny Cadillac up there, right by his old grimy truck. It's kind of unusual, you know. It didn't seem right. But anyway, we were walking along, and I told her, you know, Rose, you know, I was a kid, and what you guys up there came to all your dances. No, she thought that was fine, and I said, I can't believe I'm walking down the path there with Rose Maddox. And she kind of liked that, and then so she opened the door, and I'm of her Cadillac, the trunk door, and got the records out, and I go, and she screamed, "Don't slam that door!" Scared the, you know, out of me. And she goes from nice and quiet because she can get pretty, you know, out loud at times, and I kind of, oh, okay.
She could blow a whole band off the stage with her power of her voice.
Oh yeah. Her brother said something one time that I actually have used, kind of copied in some of our appearances. You know, you guys say, "Is everybody having a good time?" Yeah. Well, we'll put a stop to that. You can just hear her saying that.
Fred used to say that.
Fred used to say that.
They were a wild bunch.
Yeah, we'll put a stop to that.
Do you have one, Steve?
Real quick one. For many years after I had stepped down from being the chair of the association, I was asked to come back and do MC work, which I enjoyed doing. I MC'd at the first one. Seems like makes some sense. One of the years when I was doing that, I got to introduce Rose, and she recognized and remembered that I was the MC because I was walking by her with my wife and our little daughter Sarah, and she was sitting down off to one side, and she motioned to me to come over. And what she wanted to do was she wanted to pick up little Sarah and put her on her lap. So someplace in our archives we got a picture of that. But that's, you know, who she was. She was keeping track. She knew what was going on with people.
Yeah.
And so she got a hold of Sarah. Sarah sitting on her lap, and someplace I'll have to sometime get Betty to pull up some of those pictures of that. So that I thought that was kind of fun.
Well, at that benefit that I was talking about that Bill White was having for her, and we were playing, my band was playing there too, and so I said, "Has anybody heard of the Uptown Ballroom downtown Modesto?" "I do!" And she was in the crowd, she was in the audience, "I do!"
When I lived in Valley Springs, she used to come to my house and to hide from the world, you know, because very few places she could go, you know, to hide from the world. And she'd call me up, she says, "You gonna be home next week?" "Yeah." She said, "I'll be down, I'll spend 2 or 3 days." So she'd come down, my kids would just wait on her hand and foot and just spoil her rotten. Some of my favorite memories when she used to come spend time there at the house with us.
She's had such an enormous effect on women. In the history of bluegrass.
Nobody could own a crowd like Rose Maddox.
Man, she was a performer. And
She was a consummate
and a half. When she got on that stage, I don't care who was behind her, Jim and Jesse, they faded into the wall. They were just the boys, you know.
Yeah.
"Okay, boys, you love," you know.
Weird.
You never get the F. So fast. That was Rose.
Put her in
Yeah.
F as in love.
Well, she did really well with the Bluegrass Patriots.
Yeah.
They bothered to learn all her
Yeah.
material and got
Well, you had to be with her in a key change like that, because she
Yeah.
just start right off.
And she had, I forgot the bass player's name, he was beat red by the time she was done with him. But she got, yeah.
Jokes.
Oh
Lot of
gosh,
jokes.
look what I got here.
Merciless.
You know, she's got these 5 good-looking guys up there,
Yeah.
and then she zoned in on him, and you know started doing this, and he was just, you know,
Yeah.
it's pretty funny.
Good memories.
But she could, when she got out on that stage, as sick as she was, she started singing, she lit up, and the whole audience lit up. She was so dynamic as a
Yeah.
performer, so commanding, and so, you know.
Even Johnny Cash said she was the greatest performer he ever played with.
You guys remember sitting here about 3 o'clock in the morning drinking whiskey and talking about starting an association?
I don't really have a good memory of that.
I don't think it was that late.
Too many drinks of whiskey in between now and then, sips of beer.
We'll leave Jake a spot
Yeah,
here.
we're missing Jake and Vern and Ray.
Yeah, Jake.
I don't think they were out.
Vern and
Ray
Ray
were sitting right here with us.
Were they really?
You bet.
I-
Ray was sitting right over there in a chair, and Vern was sitting right there.
Like I say, Ray was a charter member, but Vern wasn't. I don't know why. He didn't want to sign up for that. You know, the fact they haven't had education. Education doesn't reduce smartness.
Education doesn't make you
If you ever
smart.
went to college, you'd be as smart as you are
Yeah.
with your native intelligence.
All you got.
I've met so many really bright, smart people in the music
Yeah.
business.
One of my brothers is that way. I mean, he's not in the music business, but he didn't even finish high school. And really brilliant guy.
But you know, you being a professional, and same here. What chance do we to meet a plumber or electrician or some person? Except we go to a bluegrass festival, we start picking with friends. You don't have a care in the world about
No.
what their background is.
Yeah.
Can they play their instrument? You know how they sound good. They
You
sing
get that
good,
right.
sing well.
Yeah.
Your
And that boy
grammar
sing the
goes
third
to the
part?
pot, and you get to know people as people, and it's a great leveler in a sense.
Well, like Bill Monroe said, this music's made more friends than any other kind of music in the world.
Absolutely.
I believe it.
You go to a festival and you exposed to all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds you wouldn't meet any other way.
But they're there for
And
one thing, and that's the
that's
common
right.
denominator
They
of
come
music.
together and it becomes an extended family almost, the bluegrass world.
How many years ago was it we sat here with all of our other people? God bless them.
1974.
1974.
I missed the chicken though.
Did you? You did?
I know. I had it then, I think. I
Oh.
probably had some chicken then.
Yeah. Well, you know, I got to tell
What
you.
we're
this.
laughing about, Jack had this party, and it was called the Pickin' and Chicken Party, but his neighbor had another name for it. It's called the Pluckin'
Chuckin' party.
Party. And you can add whatever you want to on there.
There goes that one.
There goes that.
Well, had them because there wasn't anything happening
not?
in bluegrass.
We didn't have no place to get
And,
together and pick.
Musical get together.
Yeah, musical get together, and I invited all my
Bring out your
musical
pickin'
friends, and I
friends.
told them bring their musical friends. And the first one was, boy, people all over the place. The second one and third one just kept getting bigger. And one day Al Canote said, well, I want to close up. He was on the radio down here, right in Los Gatos, KTAO or something like that. And he says, I'm going to leave now. I'm going up to Jack Sadler's. He's having a big picking party up there.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Come on and all.
Yeah, come on home. And
And
there were
most of them
cars.
showed up.
The
Fire department.
fire department came up because the cars were parked all the way from here along down to the end of the road. I'm talking at the bottom down there. And in places, I think they parked in some people's driveway too. And then all up here, everything was full. And the police came and the fire department came up too. And so we had to have some people go move their
We
cars.
had to end up getting them drunk too.
Yeah. And so we had them, I think, 4 or 5 in a row. And boy,
What'd Jan think of the little
she
parties?
absolutely loved it.
Oh, she was right in the
Oh,
middle of
yeah.
it.
But there's one thing happened that she didn't appreciate. Some total stranger walked up and said, "Do you know where there's any bathrooms around here?" And Jan, well, yeah, I live here. The lady didn't know she lived here. And so she told her where it was. So Jan figured, well, there's a lot of people that we don't even know. So anyway, there was other events started, where you get together than just that. But we had them for a while. Yeah,
Right here's where it all started.
yeah. Well, that's where we got to meet Carl
Jake.
and Jake. Of course, Jake and I had been friends for some time.
When did you meet Jake first time? How did you meet him?
I don't even remember. I was trying to think of that in there when you guys talking, where I met Jake Quisenberry, and it just seemed like I've known him all my life, because we got really tight.
You probably didn't know him before '73, I would think. He was playing country music all over this place.
He was, yeah.
But he wasn't playing bluegrass. He admits that. He just he felt frustrated, but
he was ready to go.
I didn't know that.
Did Jake open for Porter Wagner?
Did he what? He got an offer from Porter Wagner.
Didn't he
go on the
open
road.
some shows for him? That's
Yeah, he had a chance to go on the road with Porter as a member of his band, I think, something like that.
But I think he opened for him a few times.
Well, and I think Porter asked him to come and
Yeah,
play with
that's
him.
right. That's what I
And
heard.
he turned him
yeah.
down because of his family. He had
Yeah.
4 daughters. And Jake was always sensible and organized, and even when temptation was, that had to be tempting. Have a professional
Oh,
musician
yeah.
say, "Go on the road with me," He had to think about it probably more in a couple seconds before he said no.
It's funny how Jay left here as Jake Quisenberry. He came back as Jake
Jake.
Quisenberry, and I have a little trouble remembering that.
Well, I do too. Well, it took me a long time, but Jake, that was a personal preference of
Yeah.
Jake's. He wanted to be called Jake, not Jay. We never knew that he was
Yeah.
not Jay until until it came out later,
He was a man among men.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'd call him anything you wanted to call him.
So I can be ready on the great judgment day when problems arise that I don't understand. I kneel down and wait, yes I wait. I wait for the touch of God.